People often fear giving credit because they worry it will diminish their status in some way. However, as we will see, the opposite is often true. I've been really grappling recently with the Mel Robbins, Cassie Phillips, Let Them saga situation, trying to understand, what's going on beneath the surface and how even after recently breaking her silence and commenting to the New York Post, why Mel Robbins remains resolute in her inability to give credit to Cassie Phillips or her Let Them poem or the viral tattoo movement that had started in 2022 before she'd even heard about the Let Them theory. And this thing that undoubtedly led her directly or indirectly to the Let Them theory that she then went on to write a best-selling book about. A post by Adam Grant caught my attention and kind of shed light a little bit on why this might happen and why the self-help industry might be especially vulnerable to this kind of thing. He shared on Instagram, "Sharing credit doesn't detract from your success. It displays your character. 17 studies show that when people feel insecure, they hesitate to celebrate others and fail to earn respect. Being gracious is a virtue. The most honourable way to succeed is to be the rising tide that lifts all boats." And so in this episode, I want to think about this vicious cycle of status insecurity, as it is defined, and consider where this comes from, what it does to us, and how we might gently rebel against its tempting allure, if indeed we are especially prone to it.
We're about to witness the greatest miracle of the machine age.
The Gentle Rebel Podcast.
I'm so glad you could come. This is going to be such an exciting day. I hope you enjoy it. I think you will.
Hey, I'm Andy Mort, and this is the Gentle Rebel Podcast, where we explore the intersection of high sensitivity, creativity, and contemporary culture. So Adam Grant, as I mentioned before, pointed to research by Catherine Hoff, Derek Rucker, and Adam Galinsky into what they call the vicious cycle of status insecurity. Their work focuses on social hierarchy and consumer behaviour and describes how individuals who feel insecure about their social status might engage in behaviours that can perpetuate or worsen the concerns that they have and even lead to a drop in approval and respect from others, the things that they are searching for on this quest. And so the cycle begins with status insecurity, when individuals view their social status as unstable or at risk. And this can arise from comparisons with others, societal pressures, or personal failures. And then the next bit is compensatory consumption. And so they say to alleviate their insecurity, individuals often engage in conspicuous consumption, so buying luxury goods, status symbols, or expensive items to signal higher status to others. This behaviour stems from the desire to prove their worth or enhance their perceived social standing. And then, for obvious reasons, this conspicuous consumption can result in financial strain, as individuals may overspend or incur debt in order to uphold appearances. And this financial pressure amplifies the stress and the anxiety. And this leads to reinforced status insecurity. So the financial strain and stress from overspending can further undermine a person's sense of status, creating this feedback loop. And they may even feel more insecure about their position in the social hierarchy, which again leads to increased compensatory consumption. And so then the cycle repeats. It continues as individuals repeatedly try to compensate for their status insecurity through consumption, only to find themselves in a worse financial and psychological position as a result. And so this cycle really highlights how status concerns can drive maladaptive behaviours, trapping individuals in a difficult-to-break pattern of consumption and insecurity. Status insecurity is fueled by doubts about whether others respect and admire you. And if those values have been drilled into you as mattering more than anything else in the world, this can become an issue. Of course, we all naturally need a healthy sense of acceptance and validation at the level of being, as we sort of hold our own sense of self-worth. That's part of the human experience. We're social beings. We find safety in community rather than isolation. But I'm reminded once again of that Jiddu Krishnamurti quote that I often come back to. It's no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. And this vicious cycle of status insecurity strikes me as a symptom of becoming adjusted to a profoundly sick society, one that equates worth with status, leaving many feeling perpetually inadequate and fighting for that, trying to find it outside of ourselves. And so it doesn't surprise me that this research indicates that giving credit to others actually boosts the status of both the sharer and the recipient of that credit. Sharing credit, elevating others, and providing opportunities for people, wherever they are on the socio-economic landscape, increases trust and connection. And on the flip side, if somebody purports to be self-made or to have developed their ideas without any input or support from others, I'm immediately skeptical, because that's simply not how life works. The researchers provide evidence for this vicious cycle across 17 studies, as Adam Grant had mentioned. This includes a content analysis of people's personal experiences with status insecurity, an archival analysis of the final speeches on the reality TV show Survivor, and more than a dozen experimental studies. And these experimental contexts included consulting pitches, venture capital competitions, and idea generation contests to enhance the generalizability and external validity of this hypothesis. And to demonstrate discriminant validity, they differentiate status insecurity from self-esteem insecurity. So self-esteem insecurity stems from internal doubts about one's intrinsic worth and value, whereas status insecurity arises from external concerns about one's social rank and standing relative to others. How we feel versus how we believe others perceive us. And across the studies, status insecurity consistently decreased status sharing, while status sharing reliably increased one's status. So ultimately, status insecurity paradoxically lowers one's status because it reduces the propensity to elevate and celebrate others. So while it might temporarily perhaps boost someone's perceived status, as people kind of believe what they've said and, what they're telling people they are, or what they tell people they've done, or whatever, over time, the trust, the reputation, the reliability of that individual starts to diminish as the scales fall from the eyes of those around them, and they begin to question the validity of their claims. And so I wonder if this vicious cycle of status insecurity might profoundly impact self-help authors, or the self-help world, where kind of careers are built on personal transformation and success narratives, the hero's journey stories. And in an industry that glorifies individualism and originality and self-made achievement, the pressure to maintain credibility and status can lead to decisions that prioritize image over integrity. And this dynamic can trap authors in a cycle where their sense of worth becomes tied to external validation, such as book sales, social media influence, or just general public perception that they are something, rather than a kind of intrinsic internal fulfillment, satisfaction, and sense of integrity and authenticity. Over time, this pressure can drive behaviors that really undermine the credibility that they have, creating a precarious house of cards that is built on this need to constantly prove their status, whether it's coming up with ideas, putting things out there that impress other people, giving this perception of originality and profound wisdom. And so this brings me to this bizarre story that, I've been part of researching and exposing recently, quite by accident, not by preference, about Mel Robbins and the controversy surrounding this let them theory. Robbins, who is a prominent self-help author and speaker, built her brand on a narrative of personal discovery and empowerment and positioning herself as this original thinker with advice to help her millions of followers. Those are people who find great value in what she does and what she's done. However, it has come to light that she presented the let them theory as her own idea and left out acknowledgement of its contextual origin. And this decision may well have stemmed from this immense pressure that I guess authors are under to maintain status as an innovative thought leader in a competitive industry and in a space that really values this self-made success. Crediting someone else for an idea might have felt like a risk to her credibility. Yet, as we have been exploring and as the truth emerges, the decision to obscure the theory's origins kind of backfires. And from the many comments on my video on this story and on the comments of the articles and the posts, people who have been followers and admirers for a long time are starting to feel this sense of disappointment and even betrayal by the misleading narratives that have been spun to maintain status or to try maintaining status through deliberately avoiding acknowledgement of Cassie Phillips and that viral Let Them poem that would have certainly directly or indirectly led to Mel's discovery of the idea. You know, in her own words, I've just heard about this thing called the Let Them theory, which, yes, happened in March 2023, many, many months after the poem first went viral. And so, ironically, you know, honesty, I think, about the theory's source could have enhanced her credibility, demonstrating humility and a commitment to collaboration and to sort of that rising tide lifting other ships. And these are really qualities that so many of us value. Instead, this fallout has undermined her status, you know, illustrating how the pressure to maintain an image of originality and of self-made success and, you know, self-generated ideas and insights can lead to short-term decisions that harm long-term credibility. This is a widespread phenomenon, and other figures in the industry have done similar things. I've been hearing from people who have lots of different examples where similar things have happened. But I think Robbins' experience is a cautionary tale about the risks of prioritizing status and image over transparency and integrity. It highlights how this vicious cycle of status insecurity can trap even those who appear to have made it, even those people who have become very successful doing what they do. And it reveals the fragility of building a personal brand on the perception of self-made success. When the foundation of that brand is then called into question, the consequences can go deep and it can damage trust and call into question the authenticity, not just of this particular example, but the entire body of work as people reflect on that kind of, bigger picture. So the implications of status insecurity are extensive, influencing individuals and relationships, workplaces, and larger sort of cultural systems. Recognizing these effects can help us to unveil how deeply rooted the cycle is and why it can be so challenging to break as well. So for individuals, status insecurity significantly impacts mental health, often resulting in chronic stress, anxiety, burnout. You know, this ongoing pressure to validate one's worth or uphold a specific image in the eyes of other people is draining, it's exhausting. And it may also result in self-sabotaging behaviours such as, you know, overworking for the sake of validation, or people-pleasing for approval, or avoiding risks due to fear of failure. And over time, these behaviours can undermine self-confidence and create this cycle in which individuals feel confined by this need for external validation, constantly judging their own self-worth by the feedback they're getting from the world out there and changing the things that they do, or sort of modifying the actions that they take in order to appease others or receive praise. In relationship context, status insecurity can strain both personal and professional relationships. You know, personal relationships can become sites of competition or jealousy or a lack of trust as individuals compare themselves to friends, family, partners. In professional settings, it can create an environment of rivalry rather than collaboration, where colleagues view each other as threats rather than allies. And this dynamic can make it really hard to form genuine connections as interactions become transactional. They focus on maintaining or elevating one's status rather than kind of building and nurturing meaningful connections and bonds with one another. And then at a broader cultural level, status insecurity perpetuates inequality. It reinforces hierarchical structures. So to break this cycle, we need to really start by thinking and redefining success in ways that move beyond individual achievement and material wealth, emphasizing collective well-being, collaboration, and personal fulfillment over status. These things can just help to shift the cultural narratives away from competition and towards connection, collaboration. And by challenging the idea that success is this finite resource, very narrowly defined, and recognizing these other barriers that limit opportunities, we can begin to create a world where status insecurity no longer dictates our sense of worth or the actions that we take. And it can benefit individuals through the way that we hold ourselves in a collective sense. So what are some of the ways that we can gently rebel against this allure of status insecurity? So the obvious thing to start with is giving credit, taking that extra moment to find the source of what you're sharing, include them, thank them. This doesn't mean making yourself small or diminishing your contribution to the bigger picture. It actually kind of allows you to own and enjoy the part that you play in that bigger picture. Then we might think about how we can change the conversations. When conversations are tied to achievements, titles, social standing, those kinds of things, it increases the perceived value of those things and fuels feelings of inadequacy in many of us. Instead, let's connect around things that people do for fun, for example, and make space for human creativity and non-productive play. Exploring those things together, talking about those things, putting those things as, the stuff that makes life worth living, the stuff that work enables, rather than making work and social standing this kind of be-all and end-all of everything. And then this also, by sort of taking that focus away from the status bit, that actually kind of strengthens interpersonal relationships and ironically increases our shared sense of status. Then celebrate collective success, shifting the focus from individual achievements to collective accomplishments, the things that we're working towards together, by focusing on what it is that we do in collaboration, in creative community, we actually increase the self-worth of individuals as well. When we have a role, when we feel like actually we've got something to contribute to something bigger than ourselves, we feel part of something alongside others. And this leads to increased satisfaction, happiness, health, well-being. And then defining success on your own terms. What brings you satisfaction? So often when we strip back all the fluff and noise of these external pressures and these kind of extrinsic measures of success, we often find these deeper, more personal, intrinsic values, these drivers that actually kind of are much more compelling and much more valuable to us deep down. And then avoiding falling into this trap of comparison, however that might look. If there's one main takeaway from this idea for me, it's the more you fight, the worse it gets. The more you try and grab it, the harder you try to hold on, the worse your grip becomes. I remember someone who was kind of stuck in this way of thinking, part of a social group that I was in many years ago. And every conversation when they were involved became about them. They would name drop or, your story would pale in comparison to something that had happened to them. They would, share all of these experiences to signal how impressive their life had been. And over time in the group, you could sense this growing exasperation. Over time, they were sort of gradually and inadvertently sort of shut out of things, not invited to the proverbial brunch at the weekend. And when they were at places, you just sense this strain on the energy of the group. People's heads would drop and be like, oh, this is hard work, because, you know, they really didn't understand that what bonds us together as humans isn't being impressed by other people's accolades or their network of friends and colleagues or associates, whatever, or their past accomplishments. You know, those things, of course, have a place. There's a time to talk about that stuff. But if you use them to establish credibility or to try and get people to be impressed by you or to force belonging into a situation or status at every opportunity, then you're going to find that actually that has the complete opposite effect in the long run. So yeah, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever felt this pressure maybe to prove your worth or status in some way? Maybe you have been in a similar situation to the one I just described. I'd love to hear your thoughts, you know, any responses to this stuff or anything that I've talked about in this episode. Do drop a comment or send me a message. And yes, I'd love to hear from you. So I will catch you again soon for another episode of the Gentle Rebel podcast. Until then, do remember that you are an artist. The world needs your art. Now go and make somebody's day. Bye-bye.
So shines a good deed in a weary world.
Can all be angels in disguise. We can be